As businesses, and indeed as a society, we don't want to discriminate against people based on race or gender. But for you as a data scientist, the equation's often a bit different. You do want to build models that discriminate on certain factors. Can you talk about the distinction between discrimination from a societal perspective versus as a data scientist?
Well, I would say my entire job is trying to discriminate, right? You feed me zeros and ones, people that churn, people that didn't churn, they took your marketing offer, they didn't. And I'm trying to work out what customer characteristics led to them being a 0 or a 1. So all of our models are trying to discriminate.
So what would be an example of where you're looking to discriminate, but in a fair way?
Well, let's take a customer churn example. No one would probably argue it's unfair to take into account, as in your model to take into account, have you called customer service before, yes or no? Because that might be indicative of your future behavior or which products you hold or whether or not you've got a lot of money in your account or you don't. I think where it crosses the line is when we directly use factors like the protected classes like ethnicity, race, or even sometimes age, depending on the domain.
One of my understandings with this is that even when we remove those explicit variables from our data set, we can still bias our model. How does that happen?
It definitely happens. I think it's very easy to exclude gender directly from your data set and say, well, hey, I'm not discriminating on gender, but that's not necessarily the case. And this is where it gets a bit of a gray area because some of your non-gender factors in the model might themselves be correlated to gender. So implicitly, you are including gender in there. The debate is more around, is that fair? Because there are inherent differences perhaps between males and females that you are allowed to account for. So it's a very tricky situation. I don't think there's a clear answer on that, but just excluding the factor directly is not enough.
So let's bring it back to pricing then. We've built a model that includes variables that are fair, but we are still ultimately coming out with a different price for different customers. How should we be thinking about that from a fairness point of view?
Well, I would say customer price would kind of break down into two components. There's the risk-based price, and then there's the market element added on top. So if you go to a price comparison website, there's a long questionnaire. They're trying to work out your risk-based drivers. So they're trying to work out where do you park your car? How many miles do you drive? Is an obvious one, but clearly the more you drive, the more likely it is that you'll suffer some losses. So the models that sit behind the fair pricing would work out your expected losses. Simply, what is it going to cost the insurer to take you on from an expected value perspective? On top of that, there's more of the market dynamics. If an insurer is looking to grow their customer book in the younger segment, maybe they'll price them more attractively relative to their risk. Maybe you're, Neil, you have certain characteristics that make you more willing to pay, and they can try and take advantage of that. And I think that's where personalization comes in, and that's probably where the fairness equation is most focused.
Insurance is surely slightly different because in that space, you're almost relying on not knowing and not being able to discriminate. So you just have to take basically an average of what's going to happen, because the minute that you discriminate, everyone over 50 gets nice cheap insurance and a 17-year-old can't get any insurance. How should we think about the impact of personalized pricing on markets?
Well, I would go back to some of what we spoke about before, where you mentioned age as a discriminatory factor. But really, as the modeler, I would say, well, what am I trying to proxy for by using age? Because age itself doesn't make you drive any better or worse. Is it accumulated driving experience? Maybe that's what the proxy for age is, in which case it seems fair to give better rates to someone who's driven for 25 years rather than 5 years. So maybe it's not age you're actually capturing. Maybe the variance is really experience.